I never should have accepted Uncle Morris's invitation to stay for the summer, but Mom was going through her divorce, and she needed space to figure things out. Morris lived alone in that big house outside town, and he seemed genuinely excited to have company. "You'll love it here, Danny," he'd said over the phone. "Plenty of room to spread out, and I could use the help with some projects." The house looked normal enough when I first pulled up the gravel driveway. 2 stories of faded yellow siding, a wraparound porch that sagged slightly on one side, and windows that needed washing. Morris came out to greet me, his thin frame moving with surprising energy for a man in his 70s. His hair had gone completely white since I'd last seen him at Christmas, but his eyes still held that mischievous spark I remembered from childhood. "Danny boy," he grabbed my shoulders and squeezed. "Look at you all grown up, 22 and still handsome as your old man." He helped me carry my bags inside, chattering about the weather and asking about my college plans. The interior was cluttered but clean, filled with mismatched furniture and the musty smell of old wood. That first week passed peacefully enough. Morris cooked hearty breakfasts and told stories about his younger days working construction. We spent afternoons fixing loose boards on the porch and clearing brush from the backyard. He was good company, even if he seemed a bit more scattered than I remembered. Sometimes he'd stop mid-sentence and stare off into space, as if listening to something I couldn't hear. The basement was off limits from day one. "Nothing down there but junk and spiders," Morris explained when I offered to help organize storage. "Haven't been down myself in months." He kept the door locked with an old brass key that hung from his belt loop, and whenever I walked past it in the hallway, I noticed he'd glance toward it nervously. I might never have discovered the truth, if not for the sounds. They started on my second Wednesday there, just after midnight. I was lying in the guest room upstairs when I heard what sounded like scratching coming from somewhere below. Not mice or rats, too rhythmic, too purposeful. It went on for maybe 10 minutes before stopping abruptly. The next night, the same thing happened. This time I crept to the top of the stairs and listened carefully. The scratching was definitely coming from the basement, accompanied by what might have been whispers. I considered waking Morris, but something held me back. He'd been acting stranger lately, jumping at sudden noises and muttering to himself while he worked. On Friday night, I decided to investigate. Morris had taken his evening sleeping pill and was snoring loudly in his room by 11. I slipped downstairs and tried the basement door, knowing it would be locked. But as I jiggled the handle, I noticed the wood around the lock was old and soft. A few careful pushes with my shoulder, and the whole latch gave way with barely a sound. The stairs creaked under my weight as I made my way down with my phone's flashlight. The basement was larger than I'd expected, stretching under most of the house. Cardboard boxes were stacked along the walls, and an old furnace hummed in one corner. But what caught my attention immediately was the door at the far end. It wasn't like the other doors in the house. This one was made of heavy dark wood with iron hinges that looked hand-forged. Strange markings were carved around the frame. Not letters or numbers, but twisted shapes that hurt to look at directly. The door itself stood slightly ajar, and I could see faint blue light seeping through the crack. I should have turned around right then. Every instinct told me to go back upstairs, pack my things, and leave. Instead, I found myself walking toward that door, drawn by curiosity and something else I couldn't name. The air grew colder with each step, and I started to smell something sweet and rotten, like fruit left to decay in the sun. The scratching sound started again as I reached for the door handle. But now I could tell it wasn't scratching at all. It was more like fingernails dragging across stone. And those whispers I'd heard weren't human voices. They were higher pitched, almost musical, but with an underlying tone that made my teeth ache. I pushed the door open wider and stepped through. The room beyond defied explanation. It was massive, far larger than the basement that contained it, with walls that seemed to stretch up into darkness. The blue light came from phosphorescent moss growing in patches across the stone surfaces. But the most disturbing part was the pit in the center of the room. It was perfectly circular, maybe 12 feet across, with smooth sides that dropped down into blackness. The rim was worn smooth, as if countless hands had gripped it over the years, and floating just above the opening, suspended in the air by nothing I could see, was a small platform made of the same dark stone as the walls. Something was moving on that platform. I took a step closer, squinting in the dim light. The shape was roughly human size, but wrong in fundamental ways. Its limbs were too long, and they bent at joints that shouldn't exist. As I watched, it raised what might have been its head and looked directly at me. The face was the worst part. It had features that almost resembled a human's. 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth. But they were arranged incorrectly, as if someone had tried to recreate a person from a half-remembered description. The eyes were too far apart and glowed with the same blue light as the moss. The mouth was a vertical slit that opened to reveal rows of needle-sharp teeth. "You're not Morris," it said, and its voice was like wind through broken glass. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The thing on the platform tilted its head, studying me with obvious interest. When it moved, I could see that it wasn't standing on the stone. It was somehow fused with it, its lower body melting into the surface like melted wax. "Morris brings me food," the creature continued, its vertical mouth moving in ways that made me nauseous. "But he's getting old, forgetful. Sometimes he forgets to come down here for days." It leaned forward, and I caught a whiff of that sweet decay smell again. "Are you here to feed me instead?" "I don't know what you're talking about," I managed to whisper. The thing laughed, a sound like breaking bells. "Morris didn't tell you? How disappointing. He's been caring for me for 43 years, ever since he accidentally opened the door while renovating this house. Such a good nephew, always making sure I don't get hungry enough to leave this room." My mind raced, trying to process what I was hearing. Uncle Morris had lived in this house since before I was born. He'd bought it as a young man, planning to flip it for profit, but he'd never sold it, never even finished the renovations. Now I was starting to understand why. "What do you eat?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. The creature's eyes brightened. "Living things mostly. Morris brings me cats and dogs from the animal shelter. Sometimes rabbits he traps in the woods, but I prefer bigger prey when I can get it." Its gaze swept over me from head to foot. Much bigger prey. I took a step backward, but the door had somehow closed behind me. The handle turned freely in my hand, but the door itself wouldn't budge. Panic started to set in as I realized I was trapped in this impossible room with something that wanted to eat me. "Don't bother," the creature said, watching my struggles with amusement. "The door only opens from the outside now. Morris will come down tomorrow morning to check on me, and then we'll see if he's willing to make a trade." "A trade?" "His life is almost over anyway. He's sick, you know. Liver problems from all that drinking he did in his younger years. I can smell the disease in him." The thing shifted on its platform, and I noticed that the stone beneath it was stained dark with old blood. But you're young, healthy. You'd last me much longer. The implications hit me like a physical blow. Morris wasn't just feeding this creature, he was planning to feed me to it. The invitation to stay for the summer, his nervousness around the basement, the way he'd been acting, it all made horrible sense now. He won't do it, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. He's my uncle. Family. Family. The creature seemed to taste the word. Yes, Morris used to talk about family. He had a brother once. Your father, I believe. Morris brought him down here too many years ago. Said he was curious about the sounds in the basement, just like you. My legs gave out, and I collapsed onto the cold stone floor. Dad had disappeared when I was 5 years old. Mom always said he'd run off with another woman, but they'd never found any trace of him. No credit card activity, no phone calls, nothing. Now I knew why. Morris felt terrible about it afterward. The creature continued, its voice taking on a mockingly sympathetic tone. He cried for weeks, but he couldn't let me starve, and your father was already down here asking questions. It was easier to let everyone believe he'd abandoned his family. The room seemed to spin around me. Everything I'd believed about my father, about Morris, about my own family had been a lie. Morris wasn't the kindly uncle who'd offered me shelter. He was a monster who'd murdered his own brother and was planning to do the same to me. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. The creature shrugged, a disturbingly human gesture from something so alien. Morris never talks anymore, not really. He just brings food and leaves. I get lonely. It paused, studying me with those horrible glowing eyes. Besides, you'll be dead soon. What does it matter if you know the truth? I forced myself to stand up and examine the room more carefully. The walls were solid stone with no other exits visible. The ceiling disappeared into darkness above, but even if I could climb the walls, there was nowhere to go. The only furniture was the floating platform where the creature waited, patient as a spider in its web. "How long have you been down here?" I asked, partly to buy time and partly because I needed to understand what I was dealing with. "Time moves differently in this place," the creature replied. "Your world and mine overlap here, but they don't match up perfectly. I've been imprisoned in this room for what feels like centuries, but it might only be decades in your time." "Imprisoned?" The thing's mouth twisted into what might have been a smile. "You didn't think I chose to live in this tiny space, did you? Morris's renovations broke something important, a barrier that kept my kind from entering your world. But the break was incomplete, so I'm stuck here, unable to fully cross over, but unable to return home either." I walked closer to the pit, trying to see how deep it went. The darkness seemed absolute, swallowing my phone's light completely. But as I stared into it, I started to see faint shapes moving far below. Other creatures like the one on the platform, perhaps, or something worse. "That's where I came from," the creature explained, noticing my interest. "There are others down there, but they can't reach this room. Only I was close enough to the surface when the barrier broke." It leaned forward eagerly. "Would you like to meet them? It's a very long fall, but you'd still be alive when you reach the bottom." The casual cruelty in its voice made me step back from the edge. This thing had been feeding on Morris's guilt and fear for decades, growing stronger while my uncle slowly went insane from the weight of what he'd done, and now it wanted to add me to its collection of victims. But I wasn't going to die down here. Not like my father had, not like Morris planned. I started examining the room again, looking for anything I might have missed. The walls were solid stone, but the mortar between some of the blocks looked old and crumbling. The door was definitely locked from the outside, but maybe there was another way. "You're wasting your time," the creature said, watching my search with amusement. "Dozens of people have been trapped in this room over the years. Morris brought me his wife first, back when he was newly married, then a neighbor who got too curious about the strange sounds, a few drifters who wouldn't be missed. None of them found a way out." "His wife?" The words came out as a croak. "Oh yes, sweet little Margaret. She was the first one to see me, actually, just a few days after Morris accidentally opened the door. She screamed so beautifully." The creature's eyes grew distant with the memory. "Morris tried to convince her it was just a nightmare, but she kept coming back down here to look. Eventually, he had to make a choice." I thought about the wedding photo I'd seen on Morris's mantle upstairs. He'd always told me that his wife had died in a car accident shortly after they were married. Another lie, another murder to feed the thing in the basement. The scratching sound started again, but now I realized it wasn't the creature making it. The sound was coming from the pit itself, from whatever was moving around in the depths below. The thing on the platform was just the beginning. There was an entire world of horrors down there, separated from our reality by whatever barrier Morris had accidentally damaged. "They're getting restless," the creature observed, glancing toward the pit. "It's been almost a week since Morris brought me anything substantial. They can smell you up here, you know. Fresh meat always gets them excited." I had to get out of this room, not just to save my own life, but to stop Morris from feeding anyone else to this thing. How many people had disappeared over the years because of his guilty secret? How many families had never learned what happened to their loved ones? The creature seemed to read my thoughts. "Even if you could escape, who would believe you? Morris is a respected member of the community. You're just a troubled young man going through a difficult time with his parents' divorce. If you started telling stories about monsters in basements, they'd assume you'd had some kind of breakdown." It was right, and we both knew it. But that didn't mean I had to give up. I pulled out my phone and started recording a video explaining everything I'd learned about Morris and the creature. At least if I died down here, there would be some record of the truth. "Clever," the creature said approvingly. "But electronics don't work properly in this room. The boundary between worlds interferes with your technology." I looked at my phone screen and saw that it was completely black, despite showing full battery power just minutes earlier. The flashlight had stopped working too, leaving me dependent on the blue glow from the phosphorescent moss. "Morris should be down soon," the creature continued conversationally. "He always checks on me first thing in the morning. I wonder what he'll say when he sees you here. Will he pretend to be surprised? Will he try to convince you that I'm just a hallucination?" I didn't want to find out. Moving as quietly as possible, I made my way to the door and pressed my ear against it. I could hear faint sounds from the basement above. Footsteps, the creak of old wood, Morris moving around upstairs. He'd be down soon, and then I'd be trapped between him and the creature with nowhere to run. Unless I could surprise him. I positioned myself next to the door, hoping that Morris would come close enough for me to tackle him when he entered. If I could get past him and make it upstairs, I might have a chance to escape the house and get help. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all I had. The footsteps on the basement stairs grew louder. I heard Morris fumbling with keys, then the sound of the outer door opening. He was talking to himself the way elderly people sometimes do, but I couldn't make out the words. "Morris," the creature called out cheerfully. "Your nephew decided to visit me early. We've been having such an interesting conversation." The footsteps stopped. I could picture Morris standing at the threshold trying to process what the creature had just told him. When he finally spoke, his voice sounded tired and defeated. "Danny, are you really down there, boy?" "Don't come in," I called back. "Just unlock the door and let me out. We can talk upstairs." Morris laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I can't do that, Danny. You know too much now. Just like your father did." "You killed him," I said, my voice cracking with emotion. "Your own brother." "I didn't want to." Morris's voice was getting closer. He was walking toward the door despite my warning. But he wouldn't stop asking questions. He heard the sounds just like you did. He came down here and saw. I heard him take a shaky breath. I couldn't let him leave, not when he threatened to call the police. "So you fed him to that thing?" "I fed him to that thing." Morris's voice was right outside the door now, and his wife never knew what really happened to him. She got to believe he'd just run off instead of knowing he'd been torn apart by something from hell. The door swung open, and Morris stepped into the room. He looked older than he had just days earlier, his face drawn and his hands shaking. But he was also carrying a baseball bat, and his eyes held a determination that scared me more than the creature on the platform. "I'm sorry, Danny," he said, raising the bat. "I truly am. But I can't let this thing starve, not when it might find a way to break free completely." I dodged his first swing and tried to push past him toward the door, but Morris was stronger than his frail appearance suggested. The bat caught me in the ribs, sending me stumbling back into the room. Pain flared through my chest, and I tasted blood. "Morris, don't do this," I gasped. "There has to be another way." 43 years I've been looking for another way," he replied, advancing with the bat raised. 43 years of feeding it whatever I could find, hoping it would eventually die or disappear. But it just keeps getting stronger. The creature on the platform was watching our struggle with obvious delight. "Hit him again, Morris, but don't kill him completely. I prefer my food still breathing when I start eating." Morris swung again, and this time I managed to grab the bat. We struggled for control, both of us breathing hard. He was older but desperate, while I was younger but injured. For a moment it seemed like we were evenly matched. Then my foot slipped on the smooth stone floor and I went down hard. Morris stood over me with the bat, his face twisted with anguish. "I'm sorry about your father," he said. "I'm sorry about all of them. But I can't stop now. If I don't feed it, it gets angry. And when it gets angry, the whole house shakes. The neighbors would notice. Questions would be asked. So you just keep killing people?" "I keep the world safe," Morris snapped. "You have no idea what would happen if this thing broke free completely. The pit goes down for miles, Danny. There are thousands of them down there, waiting for their chance to climb up into our world." He raised the bat for what would probably be the killing blow. But before he could swing, something unexpected happened. The creature on the platform let out a shriek of pain and anger, its body convulsing as if it had been struck by lightning. Both Morris and I turned to look at it. The creature was writhing on its stone platform, its glowing eyes flickering like dying bulbs. Dark liquid was seeping from cracks that had appeared in its blue skin. and the phosphorescent moss on the walls was starting to dim. "What's happening?" Morris demanded. The creature tried to answer, but its voice came out as a broken whisper. "The barrier. Someone's repairing the barrier." I didn't understand what that meant, but Morris clearly did. His face went white, and he dropped the bat. "That's impossible. I made sure all the construction records were destroyed. No one else knows about the original break." "Apparently, someone does," the creature gasped. Its form was becoming translucent, as if it was fading from our reality. "They're forcing me back to where I came from." The blue light in the room was growing dimmer by the second. Soon we'd be in complete darkness. But more importantly, the creature that had terrorized Morris for decades was finally being banished. Someone, somewhere, was undoing the damage that had started this nightmare. "Who?" Morris shouted, grabbing the creature's platform and shaking it. "Who's doing this?" But the creature was too weak to answer. Its body was dissolving like mist, leaving only faint traces of blue light behind. The scratching sounds from the pit were growing fainter too, as if whatever was down there was being pulled deeper into the earth. Within minutes, the creature was gone completely. The room was now lit only by the dim glow of my phone, which had somehow started working again. Morris stood staring at the empty platform, tears streaming down his face. "It's over," he whispered. "After all these years, it's finally over." But his relief was short-lived. As the supernatural presence faded from the room, the true horror of what he'd done seemed to hit him all at once. The weight of decades of murder, of feeding his own family to a monster, of living with unspeakable guilt, it all came crashing down on him at once. "What have I done?" he moaned, falling to his knees. "My God, what have I done?" I picked up the baseball bat not to threaten him, but because I wasn't sure I could trust him not to hurt himself. Morris was having what looked like a complete mental breakdown, alternating between sobbing apologies and wild laughter. "Danny," he said suddenly, grabbing my arm with surprising strength. "You have to understand. I never wanted any of this. When I first broke through that wall 43 years ago, I thought I'd just found an old storm cellar. But then that thing came through and it was so hungry." "It's okay," I said, though nothing about this situation was okay. "It's gone now. We can figure out what to do next." Morris shook his head violently. "You don't understand. The things I did, the people I killed, there's no coming back from that. No forgiveness for what I've become." Before I could stop him, he lunged toward the pit. I tried to grab him, but he was too quick. Morris threw himself over the edge and disappeared into the darkness below. His scream echoed off the walls for what seemed like forever before finally cutting off. I stood at the edge of the pit, shining my phone's light down into the depths, but there was nothing to see except endless darkness. Morris was gone, taking his guilt and his secrets with him. The room felt different now that both the creature and Morris were gone. Less oppressive, more like a normal basement. The strange door was still there, but it looked ordinary now, just old wood and iron. Nothing more threatening than any other door in an old house. I made my way back upstairs, my ribs aching from where Morris had hit me with the bat. The house felt empty in a way it never had before, as if something essential had been drained from it. I packed my things quickly, not wanting to spend another minute in a place where so many people had died. Before leaving, I called the police and told them that Morris had suffered some kind of mental breakdown and disappeared. I didn't mention the creature or the secret room. Who would believe such a story? But I did suggest they search the basement thoroughly, hoping they might find some trace of the people Morris had killed over the years. I never learned who had repaired the barrier that kept the creatures trapped in their own world. Maybe it was someone who'd encountered similar problems elsewhere. Maybe it was just a coincidence of timing. Or maybe there are people out there whose job it is to fix the mistakes that let horrors leak into our reality. What I do know is that I never saw another creature like the one in Morris's basement. The house was sold a few months later to a developer who tore it down and built condominiums on the lot. As far as I know, the new residents have never reported any strange sounds or mysterious doors. But sometimes late at night when I'm lying in bed, I think about what the creature said about there being thousands more down in that pit. I wonder if they're still down there, trapped in their own world, but aware of ours. I wonder if other people have accidentally broken through barriers like Morris did, and what they chose to do about it. Most of all, I wonder about my father. Did he suffer when the creature killed him, or was it quick? Did he think about me and Mom in his final moments? Morris took those answers with him when he jumped into the pit, and I'll never know the truth about what happened that night 22 years ago. The divorce proceedings went smoothly after that. Mom got the house and half of Dad's life insurance money, which she'd never been able to claim before because his body was never found. She asked me once if Morris had said anything about Dad during my stay, but I told her no. Some truths are too terrible to share, even with the people we love most. I finished college and got a job in another state, far from the town where Morris had lived and died. I don't visit Mom as often as I should, partly because the drive takes me past the spot where Morris's house used to stand. Even though it's just a row of ordinary condominiums now, I can still feel something wrong about that place. The nightmares stopped after about a year, but I still have trouble sleeping in basements or underground rooms. I've never told anyone the complete truth about what happened that summer. Not my therapist, not my girlfriend, not even this account I'm writing now. Because the creature was right about one thing. Who would believe such a story? But I needed to write it down somewhere, if only to prove to myself that it really happened. That my father didn't abandon his family. That Morris wasn't the kind uncle I'd always believed him to be. And that there are things in this world that most people never have to face. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never gone down to that basement. If I'd just ignored the scratching sounds and trusted Morris when he said there was nothing down there. Would he have eventually worked up the courage to kill me anyway? Would the creature have grown strong enough to break free on its own? I'll never know the answers to those questions. All I know is that I survived something that killed dozens of other people over the years, and that survival came at a price I'm still paying. Every time I walk past a basement door, every time I hear unexplained sounds in the night, I'm reminded that the world is full of secrets we're better off not knowing. But some secrets won't stay buried forever. And sometimes late at night when the house is quiet and I'm alone with my thoughts, I can still hear the echo of that creature's voice telling me about all the others waiting down in the darkness, patient as spiders in their web, hoping for their chance to climb up into our world. I just pray that whoever repaired Morris's barrier knew what they were doing, and that it will hold for longer than 43 years. Because if it breaks again, if those things find another way through, I don't think there will be anyone left to stop them. The scratching sounds have started again, you see. Just last week, in the apartment building where I live now. They come from somewhere below my unit, always around midnight, always lasting exactly 10 minutes before stopping abruptly. I haven't gone down to investigate. I won't make the same mistake twice. But I can't help wondering, what if Morris wasn't the only one who accidentally broke through a barrier during home renovations? What if there are other houses, other basements, other secret doors that people have tried to forget? What if the thing I encountered wasn't unique, but just one of many that have found their way into our world over the years? The scratching is getting louder each night. And yesterday, I noticed that the basement door in my building has new scratch marks around the lock, as if something has been trying to get out. I should move again. Find a place without a basement, somewhere safe from the things that might be lurking below. But I'm starting to realize that there might not be any safe places left. The barriers are breaking down, one by one, and the creatures that have been waiting so patiently in the darkness are finally getting their chance to feed. I can hear them scratching right now as I finish writing this account. The sound is coming from directly below my bed, rhythmic and purposeful, like fingernails dragging across stone, just like it was in Morris's basement all those years ago. Maybe it's time to go downstairs and see what's making that noise. Maybe it's time to stop running from the truth about what's really waiting in the darkness below our feet. Or maybe I should just pack my things and drive as far away as I can, hoping that this time will be different. But I don't think it will be. I think the scratching will follow me wherever I go, because some doors, once opened, can never truly be closed again. The sound is getting louder now, more urgent. They're coming.